Hello, dear friends. We are born naked, wet and hungry, but then things get worse. Anonymous. Opinion piece. Does immortality exist? An affirmative answer in the traditions. The phoenix represents transformation. The immortality of the crab is detachment. Whoever drinks from the Grail would obtain youth. The pineal gland would be a physical Grail. It would represent an elevated state of consciousness. The Count of Cagliostro wrote on this subject. Descartes said that the pineal is the seat of the soul. Ambrosia or amrita would be the nectar of the gods. Transition week according to the news of the reset. Let's start. The blessed Buddha said that all things are transitory and impermanent, because in this universe everything that is born has to die by the law of life, except the unborn that would be eternal. But it is not the same a transitoriness of 100 years than thousands of years, like the ancient Prediluvian kings. A short life prevents the accumulation of wisdom and the attainment of enlightenment, because the lessons are forgotten from one life to another, and the mistakes are constantly repeated. Immortality supposes the indefinitive existence that manages to overcome death. Throughout history, many human beings have had the desire to live forever. The idea of immortality is considered among some philosophers as the answer to the anguish and fear produced in human beings by the awareness of their mortality and contingency. Mythology. In Greek mythology, the phoenix is a long-lived bird that regenerates from the ashes of its predecessor. According to some sources, the phoenix dies in a spectacle of flames and combustion, although there are other sources that claim the legendary bird dies as simply decays before being born again. The theme of the phoenix fooled several doctrines and religious conceptions of survival in the afterlife, as the phoenix fades away to be reborn in all its glory. According to the myth, it possessed several strange gifts, such as the virtue of its tears being healing, supernatural strength, control over fire, and great physical endurance. The immortality of the crab. One day the crab said to the chief of the gods, in quotes, "Look, Zeus, the technique is to walk sideways. If you walk forwards, you will age normally. If you walk backwards, you will age faster. So, if you walk sideways, you will remain young forever, and time will not be able to pass through your body." What the crab was referring to was mostly to live day by day without going ahead, without going back either. This would not make us immortal in this life, but we could cheat time, letting it pass us by. We would not elude death, but we could prolong life, or at least this would make us live in fully, hence the practicality of the Cancer natives, with whom this metaphor of mythology is linked. Miranda. 4 days now, without knowing how or why the name, 4 days, not four, number four, not for that, during days. During days now, without knowing how or why the name Miranda has been constantly repeating in my head, until I finally solved the mystery thanks to the help of a friend. It is about the brilliant Italian alchemist Arcangelo Miranda, author of many books that have not been translated into Spanish. Miranda reveals a mystery. We will all be reconstructed with an incorruptible body. It would be the famous body of light talked about in all spiritual traditions of humankind. A subtle body is an almost material aspect of the human body, which is neither uniquely physical nor uniquely spiritual, according to various esoteric, occult, and mystical teachings. This is in contrast to the body-mind dualism that has dominated Western thought, but holiness is a light-filled body in the Christian tradition. Traditions. The Bible says that Jesus will transform our vile body into a glorious body like his, by virtue of the power he has to subdue all things to his dominion. When Paul talks about the honorableness of our glorious bodies, he means that they will not be ashamed of sin, and they will be imperishable. They will not suffer sickness and death, nor will they be hot, cold, hungry, or thirsty. As 1 Corinthians 15:42-44 tells us, in quotes, "So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption, it will rise in incorruption. It is sown in shame, it will rise in glory. It is sown in weakness, it shall rise again in power. It is sown in animal body, it will rise in spiritual body." According to the Eastern doctrine of the three bodies, the human being is composed of three shariras or bodies emanating from Brahman by avidya or ignorance. These are the causal body, the subtle body, and the gross body. They are often equated with the five koshas or sheaths which cover the Atman. The doctrine of the three bodies is essential in Indian philosophy, in Yoga, Advaita Vedanta, and Shaivism. Paramahamsa Yogananda talked about three bodies in his famous self-biography of Yogi of 1946. Western religions are full of teachings of an external God outside of us, and incessantly cultivate in the minds of their followers the concept of feelings of guilt. But in the Eastern traditions, the inner divinity is cultivated more, which is what I believe in. But they are also not exempt from guilt feelings, with an excessively severe law of karma and a caste system of reptilian origin. Subtle body. Currently, Western scientists have begun to explore the concept of the subtle body in connection with meditation research. The subtle body model can be compared to modern maps of the central nervous system and applied in meditation research. The subtle body is important in Chinese Taoism and Dharmic traditions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, mainly in the branches that focus on yoga and other systems of Hinduism, Vajrayana Buddhism, and Chinese Taoist alchemy that contains theories of subtle physiology with focal points such as chakras and acupuncture points connected by a series of channels called nadis or meridians that transmit subtle breath called prana. These invisible channels and points are understood to determine the characteristics of the visible physical form. By understanding and mastering the subtle levels of reality, one gains mastery over the physical realm. Through breathing and other exercises, The practitioner aims to manipulate and direct the flow of subtle breath to achieve supernatural powers called siddhis and attain higher states of consciousness, immortality, or liberation. But all these powers are trifles compared to the enlightenment, called moksha, samadhi, or nirvana, which would be the supreme goal of human life. Liberation. Moksha is a term in Eastern philosophy for liberation or enlightenment. It refers to liberation from the matrix or samsara, from the endless cycle of death and rebirth laden with suffering, through the knowledge of jnana, or the true self or Atman, the lack of a permanent essence, and liberation from craving or attachment to passions and the worldly mind. The other three objectives would be Dhamma, that is, a virtuous, proper and moral life, Artha, which is material prosperity, security of income, and lawful means of livelihood, and Kama, which is pleasure, sensuality, and emotional fulfillment. According to Nagarjuna, Dhamma, or virtuous ethics, requires worldly thinking, but moksha, or liberation, is a non-worldly understanding, a state of bliss. According to Sankara, moksha is that final perfect and blissful state where there can be no change, where there can be no plurality of states, but a state of thought and consciousness that excludes actions and leads to contemplative life. Shankara's challenge to the concept of moksha parallels that of Plotinus and the Gnostics. Alchemy. What is the difference between the body of a human being and that of an ascended being? During the elevation of consciousness, matter also rises and assumes states that we do not find in nature, and more vital energy enters our body. Around the physical body there are other bodies, an etheric body where our thought forms and emotions are located, and a more external or quantum body from where the voice of our I Am originates. When the etheric body is clean, the being becomes pure listening, and in this contact with its quantum body, and the energy enters the physical body through what we call raw material. They are substances in an altered state of matter, capable of bridging between the body and the vital energy of the quantum body, and they are formed and built in the body by means of the internal alchemical furnace Athanor. The alchemists produce these substances in the laboratory. The alchemists, with small doses, claim to produce the elixir to serve one's higher self without fear of death or lack. Imagine what it would be like to be able to realize the higher self without having to die at the age of 80, to be reborn and then die again. What any human being does in many lives, in 5,000 years, an alchemist would do in a single existence. Pineal Gland. According to Arcangelo Miranda, there are two regulation systems in our body, one directed by the hypophysis gland, which inhibits vital states, the other directed by the pineal gland, which, on the other hand, could be considered the orchestra conductor of life. When the being becomes human, since it has yielded to the conditioning of the material world, and also allows itself to be seduced by it, it inevitably embarks on its journey towards death. The pineal gland is a corpuscle the size of a lentil, cone-shaped like the Grail, located at the base of our brain. It produces melatonin, a serotonin-derived hormone that modulates sleep cycles. Melatonin production is stimulated by darkness and inhibited by light, which explains the darkness of temples. René Descartes believed that the pineal gland is the main seat of the soul. From the age of 45 and sometimes much earlier, the pineal begins to calcify. Calcification impairs its ability to synthesize melatonin. According to Eastern philosophies, in its full activity it produces 972 substances and hormones. The totality of this production corresponds to that of the liquid of the immortality of the Grail, Ambrosia or amrita, the nectar of the gods, that is the substance capable of changing the code, causing an action opposite to that of the neurohumors created after an emotional stress. Tradition says that whoever drinks from the Grail obtains enlightenment. The pineal gland would be our properly programmed physiological Grail. The best known substance of the gland is the hormone melatonin. This hormone is a nocturnal product of the gland, and at night, in the absence of daily stress, we have the peak of its activity as it heals and repairs the damage of the waking phase due to the negative influence that the mind exerts on our body. Drinking for the Holy Grail would not be, therefore, a physical act, that is, drinking for the most famous and hidden of relics, but rather it represents the acquisition of an elevated state of consciousness. Cagliostro. Count Alessandro di Cagliostro was the pseudonym of the Italian occultist Giuseppe Balsamo. He became a glamorous figure associated with the royal courts of Europe, where he engaged in various occult arts, including physic healing, alchemy, and divination. When the Count of Cagliostro was condemned to death by the Inquisition, all his objects and manuscripts were given to the flames in Piazza della Minerva in Rome. Some texts were saved. One of them was the text of the ritual of the Egyptian Freemasonry, exhumed by Cagliostro, and of which he had proclaimed himself Grand Master. This text was saved since Cagliostro had produced copies for his students and validated them with his seal. According to Arcangelo Miranda, what was most interesting about the Egyptian rite was the procedure of regeneration. This was a secret method taught by Cagliostro to his disciples, so that every 50 years they could renew themselves, but he doesn't identify the composition of the so-called raw material, which would be the basis of the whole procedure. Immortality. In another part of the ritual he says, "Know that this raw material always exists in the hands of God's chosen ones, and that to obtain it, it is not necessary to be great, rich, or powerful, but to be totally loved and protected by God. I can confirm to you that with a grain of this precious matter one can make a projection to infinity." The alchemist, with the instruments of art, follows an initiatory discipline to transform the profane human being into an initiate, and through mystical death to reach the restructuring of the primitive being by giving birth to the Edenic human being or resurrected Christ. The condition of the symbolic Edenic being is that of a pure organism, in which the energies of the higher planes can enter and live again to return to them in a free and fluid way, after having accomplished the work for which its coming to this world has become necessary, the organization of more and more complex forms of life, and the victory over the laws of physics in a world material experience. In this Edenic condition, the body would contain in its interior the raw material, which would exercise its activity of making the universal vital energy flow, that is, life itself. News of the reset. First, the people of the United Soviet Republic now have a new constitution based on freedom the same as the American Constitution, not to be confused with the New World Order. Second, the mega real estate company Evergrande was delisted from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Third, the CCP is bankrupt and in receivership and would be replaced by a new instant union of sovereign nation states to develop a free society. Fourth, all federal buildings in Washington, D.C. are closed. Fifth, the Texas-based Treasury has delivered the new rainbow currency to the banks for distribution. Sixth, the Sovereign Republic of North America, which includes all of Canada, the US, and Mexico, will form a new federation that will also include Australia and New Zealand. Seventh, Hawaii declares itself a sovereign nation. 8. I hope in the future for a free union of all Ibero-American countries because of our cultural affinity. 9. Massive action in Iran with more than 700 earthquakes in a month at 10 kilometers depth. 10. There were also earthquakes this week in Iceland, Scotland, San Diego, Alaska, Iran, China, and many other countries around the world. 11. Parliament Square in the UK is walled up. 12. In the UK, trains cancelled, people forced to work from home, school buses delayed, and garbage begins to accumulate. 13. Canada is the country most affected by the flight cancellation and delays. 14th, 10 different countries would be in charge of the emergency broadcasting system that would take over the media for 10 days when the internet is replaced by the new quantum internet system. 15. The new Iraqi gold dinar will take the world stage at some point. 16. Normal banking activity will be terminated. 17. Borders around the world will change. 18. Everything is changing and starting right now. 19. People are rioting in the streets all over the world. 20. Shortages of food, fuel, and goods continue around the world. 21. A global operation would shut down Bitcoin mining because of its criminal use. 22. Energy shortage forces crypto miners to leave Kazakhstan. 23. Strong protests shake Kazakhstan for the fourth consecutive day and have already led to the seizure of airports, fires in the former presidential headquarters, and other buildings. 24. Billionaire Ray Dalio advises against holding cash and bonds amid the current paradigm shift driven by massive debt monetization and Fed interventionism in financial markets. Reflections. Gaia's energy is changing according to Aurora Ray. As a result, there will be some massive shifts taking place throughout 2022, a year of transition. First, this change was predicted in the ancient past, but today's society is unaware of it. Second, this energy shift is affecting all aspects of life and the planet. Third, the ascension process is a natural development. It is also one of the most profound changes we have ever experienced. 4. Many of you will feel different, lighter physically and energetically, more sensitive to your surroundings, and even more attuned to the spiritual world. 5. The ascension process is not easy. It is an evolution and it is accelerating. This is the main reason many feel disoriented, anxious, and fearful. 6. The ascension process will have many different events occurring in the days and months ahead. All of these changes are positive, even though they may not seem so at first. 7. We are all being given the opportunity to experience true freedom and unconditional love, to experience unlimited joy and happiness. 8. One of the most common things people have experienced is a strange sensation between the eyebrows, the third eye spot. It could be described as a warm, tingling sensation of you might even feel as if electricity is running through your body. 9. Gaia and her inhabitants are going through an ascension process where they are moving into higher frequencies. 10. The ascension process has already begun, but will continue to accelerate until 2023, when most people will have completed the process. 11. Divine light is returning to Earth, and we are experiencing a massive vibrational shift as we prepare for the new Earth. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.